Hi, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero. President Trump today confirmed on camera the issue at the center of the Democrats' impeachment inquiry.
Well, I would think that if they were honest about it, they'd start a major investigation into the Bidens. It's a very simple answer. They should investigate the Bidens, because how does a company that's newly formed, and all these companies, if you look at, and by the way, likewise, China should start an investigation into the Bidens, because what happened in China is just about as bad as what happened with Ukraine. So I would say that President Zelensky, if it were me, I would recommend that they start an investigation into the Bidens.
The comments come exactly 1 week ahead of resumed trade talks between the U.S. and China. They also reflect the same accusations the president has spent all week defending, that Joe Biden and his son Hunter deserve to be investigated for corruption. But we will remind you, this isn't the first time Mr. Trump has asked a foreign government to intervene publicly. He also requested Russia look into his then Democratic opponent, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, while on the campaign trail in 2016.
I will tell you this, Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
Today, Vice President Mike Pence defended the president and his claims about the Biden family. He said the American people have, quote, a right to know about what occurred in Ukraine.
I think is worth looking into, and the president made it very clear that he believes our other nations around the world should look into it as well.
And while all this was unfolding Thursday, the former top U.S. envoy to Ukraine, Kurt Volker, was on Capitol Hill testifying behind closed doors. He's the first witness in Democrats' probe into the president's July phone call with Ukraine's leader. Volker resigned last week, shortly after Democrats launched the impeachment inquiry. And just this afternoon, the Washington Post reports that an IRS whistleblower filed a complaint expressing concern that a, quote, Treasury Department political appointee tried to interfere with the annual audit of the president or vice president's tax returns. We are joined by White House correspondent and associate editor at Politico, Anita Kumar. And on Capitol Hill is Natalie Andrews. She covers Congress for the Wall Street Journal. Welcome to both of you, Anita and Natalie. Anita, let me start with you. The president's comments come exactly 1 week before trade talks between the U.S. and China are set to resume. Explain the extra layer of complexity that is adding to the president's remarks.
Well, it does very much complicate those talks. They've already been fraught for months. As you know, this has been, the talks broke down. The United States has been wanting to push and get China back to the table to work on this deal. You know, the president didn't say today that he's going to bring it up at the trade talks. He said he might bring it up with the Chinese president, President Xi, but it does make you think that, you know, the Chinese might say, well, do we have to do this as part of the deal? Remember what happened with Ukraine, and obviously the United States and Ukraine are very different. The United States is much more powerful than Ukraine and is providing aid to Ukraine. But, you know, in that situation, the country sort of felt that they had to act or they wouldn't get this money. It's unclear now because we haven't heard from China, but will China feel that they have to act on what the president is saying, or the trade deal won't happen? It's very unclear, and it just, as you said, brings an entire another layer to this situation.
And Natalie, the vice president has denied that President Trump sought to pressure Zelensky or even that he was aware of the president's efforts. So what sort of political jeopardy does he now put himself in with Democrats and with the larger public by now defending the president and going even further, echoing calls for an investigation into the Bidens? It almost makes you wonder if President Trump didn't ask him to do this.
Yeah, by coming out defending the president, Mike Pence almost pointed a finger, but pointed several fingers back at the administration. There were people who were saying, well, if you're defending the president, or if you're calling for an investigation into how president's children or vice president's children may have benefited from being in the administration, it seemed to point fingers back with people saying, well, what about President Trump's children? And what about President Trump? Mike Pence stayed at a Trump hotel property recently. The comments did not seem to go well and did not seem to smooth anything over with aides and people alike.
And Natalie, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is calling on Speaker Pelosi to halt the impeachment inquiry. That, of course, does not look likely. But what is his reasoning? And, does this letter change anything?
The letter will not change anything likely, but McCarthy wanted to lay out the points that there has been no House-wide vote to start an impeachment inquiry, as has happened in the past. He also raised some process questions, wanting to know more details. Nancy Pelosi responded this afternoon and pointed out the president's comments and said she's writing to you just as the president had asked Ukraine and China to investigate Joe Biden, which is exactly why investigators are on the Hill today trying to learn more information. And she didn't go into the process questions at all.
And Anita, what are you hearing from Republican lawmakers about all of this? Are they on board with this strategy? Are they clear what the strategy is?
Well, I don't think they're clear with what the strategy is, in part because the White House hasn't put out a real strategy. I mean, the strategy so far has been the president tweeting and talking sort of constantly, about what he thinks. But there hasn't been a cohesive strategy within the White House. This is the person in charge. This is what we're going to say, and this is how we're going to act. So, you'll talk to a lot of the allies of the president, people on Capitol Hill, and people close to the campaign who are saying they want to know what they should be saying and what that strategy is. So I think they're still sort of waiting for that. The president's still talking to his staff about that. But for the meantime, his strategy is just to go out there and keep talking about it and say that he didn't do anything wrong.
And Natalie, at least from a fundraising perspective, it seems to be working. President Trump surpassed his own record last month, tweeting and retweeting more than 800 times. He doesn't appear to be slowing down at all on the tweeting front. Is this messaging then, seems to be paying off with fundraising?
It is paying off. He had a very good third quarter. Per the announcement from his campaign. I was in Utah and Oklahoma over the weekend talking to voters, and they are supporting the president. They don't yet see any reason not to. They weren't raising concerns. However, that's exactly why Democrats are conducting this investigation, even though the president has today asked Ukraine and China to investigate a political rival. Democrats are looking for something, that smoking gun, that moment that might bring more Republicans on board. They haven't found it yet, but there's more depositions and testimonies expected.
And of course, Anita, President Trump spent his day in Central Florida discussing Medicare. Today's event was not a campaign event, but we, of course, can't forget the president is running for re-election. How is that element factoring into all of this?
Well, there are a lot of people that, are close to him in the White House that think it's a good idea for him to get out of Washington to talk about other things. As you mentioned, he was talking about health care and unveiled, a new proposal or an executive order, and that would be helpful for him to appear presidential. He was at the Villages, which is a huge retirement community. It bills itself as the biggest one in the country. They love him there. And so, many people voted for him there. Obviously, he won Florida. He was feeling very good about it. There's not a lot that he could say that they wouldn't love. So to them, they're not worried about what he said. They think the scandal is all about the Biden. So it must have been a great event for him. He must have been feeling good about that. And, I think that you're going to see him do more and more of these events, both to get out of Washington, but also to sort of boost his spirits a little bit and get among people that are supporting him and will support him pretty much no matter what.
Right. Definitely. He was feeling the Trump love there for sure. Now, Anita, Friday marks the deadline for Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to hand over subpoenaed documents to 3 House committees. What are you hearing about whether or not he will comply? We know earlier he said he would not, but are you hearing anything different?
I'm not hearing anything specific, but just sort of reading between the lines, it appears that they're not going to do so. It's been kind of interesting because they did, as you know, release a couple documents, what they're calling the transcript, other people saying it was a partial transcript of the call, and they've released some other things. But the White House has said in general, not particularly about tomorrow's deadline, that they still do not feel that Congress has the right to have some of these documents. They don't have the right to listen to the testimony of some of these people, and that nothing has changed for them. You know, I've talked to a lot of impeachment experts, lawyers who have done this, who say judges will look favorably on you know, giving these documents, forcing the administration to turn over documents if there's an impeachment inquiry going on. So, you know, it's possible that the House will subpoena, this will end up in court, and it's possible that a judge will rule on Congress's side, but it's just really not clear what they're going to do tomorrow.
Right. So, Natalie, if Pompeo does not comply tomorrow, what's the immediate next step for Democrats? Is the legal channel going to take some time, or will it go more quickly since this is part of an impeachment inquiry?
Adam Schiff said yesterday that they would see any effort to obstruct their investigation as a reason to include in impeachment articles, which is what happened in previous impeachment inquiries when President Nixon did not immediately include documents that became one of the articles of impeachment. And Adam Schiff alluded to that the House Democrats this year would think about the same thing, that any effort to not comply with their investigation could be considered obstruction.
And meanwhile, Natalie, former U.S. Special Envoy to Ukraine Kurt Volker, who resigned his State Department post on Friday, was on Capitol Hill Thursday. He's the first official witness to be called in the impeachment inquiry. So what more can you tell us about his testimony in front of 3 House committees?
Yeah, he arrived at 9:30, so definitely a long day for him. At one point, we were able to talk to some people who were there, and they said that he was just basically they were going through the whistleblower complaint and getting data that backed that up, talking to him through that. The Republicans said that there was no evidence of quid pro quo. That's been a line that they've used. They don't see a connection between postponing the aid money and the president asking to look into Hunter Biden. But Democrats said that he really stuck with the whistleblower complaint. And we do know from talking to a person in the room that he said he warned the Trump administration that some people the Trump administration was wanting to use as sources could be corrupt. And so he was trying to warn off that maybe these people aren't trustworthy.
And Anita, the intelligence community's inspector general, will testify tomorrow. So what do you think the committees specifically want to learn from him?
Well, I mean, there's still a lot of questions about how the whistleblower's, complaint came about. Because of this New York Times story that came out just the other day, it's unclear whether the whistleblower went first to Congress, to the House, or did they go to the intelligence community? Did he go the right way? I'm saying he. I don't know actually if it's a he or she. Did this person go through the chain of command and do what they were supposed to do? I think there's going to be a lot of questions on who was involved and who was involved in helping this whistleblower, if anyone, who found out about this, who knew about this, what did the administration know, what did the president know? We've seen some reporting that the White House was aware of this complaint. So I think there's going to be a lot of questions about other people that might have known things and people that influence the whistleblower.
It'll probably be a long day for the Inspector General as well. Anita, Kumar, and Natalie Andrews, thanks to both of you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Sure, thanks.